"You're the kind of man I was meant for," said the girl. Rancher let her stay. The sun was just beginning to rise when Emma stepped off the dusty bus, her small bag slung over her shoulder. The quiet of the countryside felt both strange and comforting. She had left behind the constant noise and crowded streets of the city, seeking something she couldn't quite name. The ranch she had applied to was far from anywhere she had known, and the idea of starting fresh both excited and terrified her. The air smelled of dry earth and pine, and somewhere nearby a rooster crowed. It was a sound so ordinary in this place, yet to her, it felt like a promise of something new. Emma walked slowly along the dirt road that led to the ranch house, her eyes taking in the wide-open fields, the fences stretching far into the horizon, and the low hills that bordered the property. She could see a few cows grazing in the distance, and beyond them, a barn that seemed to hum with the activity of unseen hands. Everything was larger, slower, and more real than the tiny apartments and busy streets she had left behind. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. As she reached the front porch, the sound of heavy boots on wood made her pause. The rancher, a tall man with broad shoulders and weathered hands, appeared in the doorway. His hair was dark, flecked with silver, and his eyes were sharp and cautious. He looked at her as if weighing her very presence, assessing whether she belonged here. "Can I help you?" His voice was low but not unkind. Emma straightened her back and smiled nervously. "Hi, I'm Emma. I'm here about the job. I'm ready to work." The rancher's eyes didn't soften immediately. He had seen many people come and go, drawn by the romantic idea of ranch life but unprepared for its hard realities. He studied her for a long moment, noticing the city-style shoes, the neat hair, and the hesitant way she stood. Finally, he nodded slightly. "Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be staying for now." Emma followed him across the yard, trying not to stare too obviously at the sprawling property. There was a sense of history here in the worn fences, the aged wood of the barn, and even in the way the horses stirred in their stalls. Everything seemed to whisper stories of past summers, storms weathered, and countless days of hard work. She imagined the rancher here all alone, managing it with skill and endurance. The thought made her heart race with both admiration and a little fear. The small cabin where she would stay was simple but clean, with a single bed, a wooden dresser, and a small table by the window. Sunlight streamed in through the thin curtains, casting warm patterns on the floor. Emma set down her bag and looked around. It was modest, certainly nothing like the apartment she had left behind, but there was a charm in its simplicity. She could see herself living here, at least for a while. When she stepped back outside, the rancher was already leading a horse from the stable. "First thing," he said, "you need to get comfortable with the animals. You can't just stand around and watch." Emma nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. She had grown up loving animals but had never handled a horse before. The rancher handed her the reins of a gentle-looking mare. "She's patient," he said, "but she'll know if you're unsure. Be confident, even if you're not." Emma swallowed and gave a small smile. "I'll try." The horse nudged her hand with its nose, and for a moment, fear and awe clashed inside her. Slowly, she began to walk alongside the animal, feeling the power in its muscles and the warmth of its body. The rancher walked beside her, offering quiet instructions. His presence was calm, almost grounding, though still strict. Emma realized quickly that there would be no shortcuts here. If she wanted to belong, she would have to prove herself. By mid-morning, Emma was sweaty and tired, but strangely exhilarated. She had learned to brush the horse, feed it, and even guide it around the corral. The rancher watched her, occasionally correcting her stance or showing her how to hold the reins. Each small success brought a spark of confidence. She could feel herself starting to belong, not just as a guest, but as someone who might actually contribute to this place. Lunch was simple: bread, cheese, and fresh fruit, eaten on the porch with a view of the fields. Emma and the rancher didn't talk much, but there was a quiet understanding between them. He was assessing her still, but not unkindly. She, in turn, was trying to gauge the rhythms of this place, the quiet patterns of work and rest, the subtle ways the rancher moved and spoke. It was a dance of observation and learning, one that felt both exhausting and fascinating. After lunch, she was introduced to the other animals: a herd of cows, a few sheep, and a lively group of chickens. Each had its own personality, and she quickly realized that understanding them would take patience. She spent hours in the sun, brushing, feeding, and walking among them, learning to anticipate their movements, their sounds, their moods. By the time the sun began to dip in the sky, she was coated in dust but smiling. The rancher called her over as he repaired a fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. "You did well today," he said. His voice carried a weight of sincerity that made her chest swell with pride. But this is only the beginning. Life here isn't easy. If you're serious, you'll keep showing up every day. "I am," Emma said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I want to learn. I want to stay." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. It wasn't a promise, she knew that, but it felt like a small victory. As evening fell, Emma sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the wide fields. The sky was painted in golds and oranges, the air cooling, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called softly. She thought about the life she had left behind and realized she didn't regret it. Here, every sound, every smell, every sight felt alive, meaningful. She had come for work, but already she felt as if she had found a place where she could grow, where she could belong. That night, as she lay in her small bed, she could hear the distant lowing of the cows, the creak of the barn, and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Sleep came slowly, her mind alive with anticipation, excitement, and a touch of nervousness. She didn't know what the next days would bring, but she felt ready. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves outside her cabin window. She rubbed her eyes and stretched, feeling both sore and alive. Yesterday had been a long day, but for the first time in years, she had felt useful. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back, and stepped outside. The ranch already smelled of earth and animals, and the sun was warm on her face. The rancher was in the yard, carrying buckets of feed. He looked up and nodded at her. "Ready for another day?" "Yes," Emma said, trying to hide the lingering ache in her arms. "I'm ready." "Good. Start with the horses." He handed her a brush and gestured toward the corral. "I'll check on the fences. Keep them calm while I'm gone." Emma approached the horses with a mix of confidence and caution. She had learned a little yesterday, but today would test her. One of the horses, a spirited chestnut, tossed its head as she reached for the reins. She took a deep breath, recalling the rancher's advice. "Be confident, even if you're not." Slowly, she stroked its neck, speaking softly. The horse relaxed, allowing her to guide it around the corral. Emma felt a quiet pride swell in her chest. By mid-morning, she had brushed every horse, filled their water troughs, and fed the hay. Sweat ran down her back, but she didn't mind. The physical work was hard, but it felt honest, real, and rewarding. She noticed the rancher returning, carrying a bundle of tools. He watched her for a moment before nodding in approval. "You're getting the hang of it," he said. "Horses respond to patience and consistency. Keep that up." Emma smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement. Praise was rare here, and when it came, it carried weight. After the horses, they moved on to the cows. She had never realized how much attention and care livestock required. They were gentle, yet unpredictable, and each one had its own personality. Emma learned to anticipate their movements, to speak softly to calm them, and to notice subtle signs of discomfort or illness. The rancher taught her the basics of milking, feeding, and inspecting the herd for injuries. She struggled at first, fumbling with the equipment, but the rancher's calm guidance made her feel capable. By noon, they took a break under the shade of a large oak tree. The rancher handed her a thermos of water and a sandwich. Emma took a bite, feeling the warmth of the sun on her shoulders. She watched him eat silently, noticing the careful way he observed the ranch. Everything here had a rhythm, and the rancher moved with it, as if he were part of the land itself. "You're different from the others," he said suddenly. Emma looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Most people who come here are curious for a day or two, then quit. You stick with it. You're serious."
Emma blushed slightly. "I want to learn."
"I want to stay." He nodded, looking away as if the words alone weren't enough to convince him. "Then show me. Every day." The afternoon brought unexpected challenges. A few cows had wandered too close to the broken fence at the far end of the pasture. The rancher asked Emma to help guide them back. At first, she hesitated, unsure how to move the animals without startling them. But slowly, step by step, she coaxed them along, keeping her voice calm and steady. The rancher assisted but allowed her to take the lead, stepping in only when necessary. By the time they returned the last cow to its pen, Emma was covered in dust, her arms and legs aching, but there was a thrill in her heart, a quiet triumph she had never felt before. She had faced a real challenge, and she had succeeded. The sun was beginning to set when they headed back to the barn. The rancher showed her how to check the animals one last time before nightfall and explained the importance of routine. Emma listened carefully, asking questions when she didn't understand. He answered patiently, though he remained silent much of the time. She respected that. His silence was part of who he was, a calm authority that demanded attention without words. Later, Emma helped feed the chickens and gather the eggs. She laughed when a particularly curious hen pecked at her shoe, and the rancher's rare chuckle reached her ears. It was small, but it made her feel as if she was part of this place, not just a visitor. That evening, Emma returned to her cabin, exhausted but exhilarated. She took a long, hot shower, letting the warm water wash away the sweat and dust of the day. She thought about the rancher, about the horses, and about the cows she had learned to care for. For the first time in a long time, she felt proud of herself, not because of something she had achieved in the city, but because she had earned her place through hard work and determination. Dinner was quiet, eaten at a small table inside the cabin. Emma reflected on the day, thinking about how much she had learned and how much she still had to master. She knew ranch life would not be easy, but the rewards, the sense of purpose, the connection to animals, and even the slow bond forming with the rancher made every challenge worth it. Over the next few days, Emma's routine settled into a rhythm. Each morning brought new tasks, each afternoon new lessons, and each evening a quiet satisfaction. She grew stronger, both physically and mentally. The rancher continued to watch her closely, correcting her mistakes and praising her successes, though words of approval were always scarce. She learned to read his subtle cues, an approving nod, a slight smile, or the way he stepped in to guide her hands. One afternoon, as they repaired another section of fence, the rancher paused and looked at her. "You're not like the others," he said again. This time his tone carried warmth beneath the caution. "You care about the work. You care about the animals. That counts for more than skill alone." Emma felt her chest warm at his words. "I care," she said softly. "I want to do this right." He nodded once and returned to his work, leaving her with a sense of quiet accomplishment. She realized that earning his trust wasn't about impressing him with words or speed. It was about showing up, day after day, ready to face the hard work with patience and respect. As the week passed, small moments built into a growing connection. The rancher began to allow her more responsibilities, letting her handle tasks independently while keeping a watchful eye from a distance. Emma felt a quiet pride in this trust, knowing that her perseverance was paying off. At the same time, she learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the sound of a horse breathing softly in its stall, the sun shining over the fields, the wind rustling through the trees. These simple things felt profound, grounding her in a way she had never experienced in the city. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the hills. The rancher handed her a glass of water, and, for a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch at dusk. Emma felt a quiet sense of belonging wash over her. This place, these animals, and even this reserved, cautious man were becoming part of her life in a way she hadn't anticipated. "I'm glad you stayed," he said finally, his voice low and steady. Emma turned to him, surprised by the rare admission. "I'm glad too," she said, smiling. "I think I belong here." He gave a small nod, looking out at the fields, as if letting the words linger in the air was enough. Emma realized that connection here wasn't about rushing or declaring feelings. It was about showing care, dedication, and respect, one day at a time. As night fell, she returned to her cabin, tired but filled with a quiet joy. She wrote in her journal, noting the lessons she had learned, the challenges she had overcome, and the sense of possibility that seemed to hang in the air. She thought about the rancher and felt a spark of curiosity and admiration for him, though she knew patience was necessary. Relationships here, like all things on the ranch, grew slowly, nurtured by trust and shared experience. Before sleeping, she opened the cabin window and looked at the starlit sky. The vastness of the countryside, the silence broken only by distant animal sounds, and the feeling of being part of something real filled her with contentment. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready for it. She belonged here, not just on the ranch, but in this life she had chosen. And as she drifted to sleep, she promised herself she would continue to work hard, learn, and grow, one day at a time. The morning air was cool and crisp as Emma stepped outside. The sky was painted with soft pinks and oranges, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Today felt different somehow, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The ranch had a rhythm, a steady pattern of work and life, and this morning something in the air suggested change. The rancher was already in the yard, examining the horses in the corral. His brow was slightly furrowed, and he moved with purpose, as if anticipating a problem. Emma greeted him quietly, trying not to disturb his concentration. He nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement of her presence. "Today, we need to check the far pasture," he said. "Some cows wandered close to the creek last night. Could be dangerous if the water is high." Emma felt a small pang of worry. She had never dealt with a potentially dangerous situation before, and the thought of something going wrong made her heart beat faster. But she also felt a surge of determination. She had come a long way, and she wasn't going to shy away now. They set off toward the far pasture, walking along the dirt path that wound through the fields. The rancher rode a horse, while Emma walked alongside, leading another. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, and in the distance, the creek glimmered in the morning light. Everything looked peaceful, almost serene, but Emma could sense the rancher's tension. As they approached the pasture, they saw the cows near the water's edge. Some were grazing, while others were nervously moving back and forth. The creek had risen overnight, swollen by rain from a storm that had passed through days earlier. Emma's stomach tightened. If the cows got too close, they could slip or be swept away. Stay calm, the rancher instructed. Speak softly, move slowly. They'll respond better if you don't panic. Emma nodded, her hands gripping the reins tightly. She took a deep breath and began guiding the cows away from the creek, her voice low and steady. The rancher stayed a few steps behind, watching her closely but letting her take the lead. At first, it was slow going. The cows were nervous, their movements unpredictable. One of them stepped too close to the water, and Emma's heart leapt. She extended her arm and spoke to it gently, coaxing it back onto safer ground. Her hands were shaky, but her determination was stronger than her fear. Slowly, carefully, she moved the animals toward the safer part of the pasture. The rancher finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Good. Keep going. You're doing fine." Emma felt a flicker of pride. The praise, though simple, carried weight. She had faced a real challenge, and she was handling it. She focused on the cows, blocking out the rest of the world, letting her instincts and lessons from the past weeks guide her. Suddenly, a loud crack of a branch startled the herd. One of the younger cows panicked and bolted toward the creek. Emma's heart raced. She ran after it, calling its name, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The rancher followed, urging the other cows away from danger. Emma reached the cow just in time, catching it by the halter and speaking to it softly. Her hands were trembling, but she held on, guiding it back to the safety of the pasture. She looked up at the rancher, who had stopped a few feet away, watching with a mixture of concern and pride. "You did well," he said quietly. "Most people would have frozen. You kept calm and acted." Emma's chest swelled with relief. She had faced a real test, one that required courage, patience, and quick thinking, and she had passed. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing she had earned the rancher's trust in a way that went beyond words. After the cows were safe, they spent the rest of the morning repairing the section of fence near the creek. The storm had damaged several posts, and the ground was soft from the rain. Emma worked tirelessly, driving posts, hammering nails, and steadying the wood. The rancher moved beside her, offering guidance when needed, but letting her take the initiative. By noon, their work was complete. They sat under the shade of a large oak tree, catching their breath and drinking water. Emma felt exhausted, but exhilarated. The sun warmed her skin, and she looked out over the pasture with a sense of pride and belonging. She had faced danger, worked hard, and succeeded. She was no longer just a visitor here. She was part of the life of the ranch. The rancher broke the silence. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice softer than usual. "And you have a calmness that matters more than speed or strength. Animals respond to it. People too, sometimes." Emma smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "I'm learning," she said. "Every day I feel a little stronger." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Good. Keep that up. Life here will test you in ways you don't expect." but if you stay steady, you'll handle it. The afternoon brought more work, but it was quieter and more controlled. They fed the animals, repaired minor equipment, and checked the barn for any signs of damage. Emma moved with confidence, her hands steady and her mind alert. She noticed small details she hadn't before: the way a horse shifted its weight when uneasy, the soft lowing of a cow indicating discomfort, the subtle signs of wear on a fence post. She felt a growing sense of mastery and responsibility. By late afternoon, a new challenge arose. A stray dog had wandered onto the property, barking and causing the chickens to scatter. Emma acted quickly, guiding the animals back to safety, while keeping the dog at a distance. She realized that every day on the ranch brought unexpected obstacles, and success required attention, patience, and quick thinking. The rancher watched her handle the situation with quiet approval. "You're learning fast," he said. "That's the kind of thinking that keeps the ranch running." Not everyone notices the small things, but they matter more than you know. As evening approached, they returned to the barn. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the sounds of animals settling for the night. Emma helped feed the last of the livestock, brushing the horses one final time and making sure the cows were secure. The rancher stood nearby, observing, offering instructions only when necessary. When the work was done, they sat on the porch together, watching the sun dip below the hills. The rancher handed her a glass of water, and for a moment they simply enjoyed the quiet. Emma felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the land and animals, but to the man who had been teaching her, guiding her, and quietly trusting her. "You did well today," he said, his voice calm. "You handled challenges most people wouldn't know how to face." Emma felt a sense of pride, but also humility. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance," she said sincerely. He nodded, looking at the horizon. "Part of living here is learning from experience. Part is paying attention. And part is trusting yourself." Emma sat quietly, letting his words sink in. She realized that trust, both in herself and in others, was the foundation of this life. She had learned to trust the animals, trust the rancher, and trust her own instincts. And in doing so, she had grown stronger, more capable, and more connected than ever before. As night fell, she returned to her cabin, tired but satisfied. The stars twinkled overhead, and the ranch was peaceful, alive with quiet sounds of animals and the wind through the trees. She thought about the day, the challenges she had faced, and the small victories that had shaped her confidence. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the ranch, the work, and the quiet man who had allowed her to prove herself. Before falling asleep, she opened her window and gazed at the moonlit fields. She felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. The ranch was no longer just a place to work. It was a place to grow, a place to belong, and a place to face whatever challenges came her way. And she knew that with each passing day, she was becoming more than she had ever imagined, a part of something larger, stronger, and more meaningful. The morning sunlight spilled across the ranch, turning the fields into a sea of gold. Emma stepped outside, stretching her arms, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. The ranch had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She felt stronger, calmer, and more alive than she had in years. The animals moved around her as if sensing her confidence, the horses nudging her hand and the cows lowing softly. For Emma, this was no longer just work. It was life, and she was part of it. The rancher appeared in the yard, carrying buckets of feed. He looked older than she remembered, his face lined with years of hard work, but there was a softness in his eyes when they met hers. "Morning," he said quietly. a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Morning," Emma replied, her voice steady. She handed him one of the buckets and followed him to the barn. Over the months, they had developed a rhythm together. Tasks that once seemed impossible now flowed naturally. She understood the animals, the land, and even the quiet ways of the rancher. After feeding and checking the animals, they sat on the porch drinking water and watching the sun climb higher. Silence passed comfortably between them. Neither felt the need to fill it with words. Their shared understanding was enough. "You've done well," the rancher said finally, his voice low but firm. "Not just with the work, but with everything. You've become part of this place." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I feel at home here," she admitted, "more than I ever have anywhere." He nodded, looking away toward the horizon. "That's good. It's not easy to find that anywhere, least of all on a ranch. Life here is demanding, and trust is earned, not given." Emma smiled, thinking back to the day she first arrived, nervous and unsure. She had been cautious, afraid of failing, afraid of not belonging. But the months of hard work, patience, and determination had brought her here, strong, confident, and connected. She realized that she had earned her place not by impressing the rancher with words, but by showing up, day after day, ready to face challenges, help the animals, and respect the land. The day passed with the familiar tasks, feeding, mending fences, checking the livestock, but there was a new sense of ease in everything Emma did. She moved with confidence, anticipating the needs of the animals and the rancher alike. The rancher, in turn, allowed her more independence, knowing she could handle it. There was trust between them now, quiet but solid, built over months of shared effort and understanding. In the afternoon, a small crisis arose. A young calf had wandered close to the edge of the pasture, and the ground near the fence had softened after recent rains. Emma reacted quickly, guiding the calf back to safety. The rancher arrived moments later, nodding approvingly. "Good work," he said simply. "That's why you belong here. You act when it matters." Emma felt a surge of pride, but it was accompanied by humility. She knew that the rancher's approval was rare, and when it came, it meant more than words. She had learned that belonging was not about recognition, but about contribution, care, and steady effort. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with oranges and purples, the rancher and Emma walked through the fields, checking the fences and making sure the animals were settled for the night. The land was quiet, except for the sounds of the animals and the wind through the grass. It was a peaceful rhythm, a shared life that neither needed to explain. Stopping on a small hill overlooking the main pasture, Emma leaned against the fence and breathed deeply. The wind carried the scent of earth, grass, and animals, and she felt completely present, completely alive. The rancher joined her, standing silently beside her, watching the horizon. "You've changed things here," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "Not just for the animals, but for me. I didn't expect anyone to stay, least of all someone who could handle all of this with patience and care." Emma turned to him, a small smile on her face. "I didn't expect to feel this connected, or to care so much, but I do. This place, it matters to me." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes softening. "I'm glad you stayed," he said quietly. "It's better with you here." For a moment, the air between them was still, filled with unspoken understanding. Emma realized that the bond they had formed was not built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on shared work, shared trust, and mutual respect. The rancher, who had always been reserved, had come to rely on her presence, her calm strength, and her determination. And she had grown to admire him, not just as a teacher or guide, but as someone whose life and heart were as steady and strong as the land he cared for. They returned to the barn, finishing the evening chores together. Emma tended the animals with practiced ease, while the rancher handled the tools and equipment. Their teamwork was seamless, a result of months of shared effort and understanding. Later, as they sat on the porch with mugs of warm tea, Emma reflected on her journey. She had arrived scared and unsure, a stranger in a new land. She had faced challenges, learned patience, gained confidence, and earned trust. And in the process, she had found not only a home on the ranch, but also a sense of belonging, purpose, and quiet joy. The rancher, sipping his tea in silence, finally spoke. "Life here is simple, but it's honest. You've proven that you can handle it. And that matters more than I can explain." Emma nodded, understanding fully. She didn't need grand words or promises. The life they shared on the ranch, the trust they had built, and the steady rhythm of work and care were enough. She felt at peace, knowing that she had found her place, not just in the ranch, but in this life, and perhaps, quietly, in the rancher's heart as well. As night fell, the sky filled with stars, and the ranch settled into quiet, Emma walked back to her cabin, her steps light and confident. She paused for a moment, looking back at the ranch house and the fields she had come to love. This place had tested her, taught her, and changed her. She smiled softly, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. Inside her cabin, she wrote in her journal, capturing the day, her thoughts, and the gratitude she felt. She thought about the rancher, the animals, and the land. She thought about the challenges they had faced together, the quiet victories, and the trust they had earned. And she realized that this life, hard, simple, and honest, was exactly what she had been searching for all along. Before sleeping, she opened the window and gazed at the moonlit fields. The air was cool, carrying the sense of grass and earth. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. But for tonight, she allowed herself to rest, content in the knowledge that she belonged here, and that the bond she had formed with the rancher and the land was strong, enduring, and real. In the days that followed, life on the ranch continued with its steady rhythm. Emma and the rancher worked side by side, sharing responsibilities, facing challenges, and supporting one another. Their relationship deepened naturally, built on trust, shared experience, and quiet affection. It was not rushed or dramatic, but it was real, lasting, and meaningful. Emma's confidence grew with each passing day. She anticipated the needs of the animals, managed the tasks independently, and offered insights that reflected her growing understanding of the ranch and its life. The rancher, in turn, came to rely on her presence and judgment. Their partnership was seamless, a balance of strength, patience, and care. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over the fields, Emma turned to him and spoke softly. "I never thought I could feel this complete, but I do. Here with the ranch, the animals, and you, I feel like I belong." The rancher looked at her, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet, unspoken understanding. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. "You do belong," he said simply, "and you always will." For Emma, those words, simple as they were, carried the weight of months of hard work, trust, and shared life. She smiled, feeling warmth and peace settle in her heart. The ranch was not just a place to live. It was a home, a life, and a love she had earned. and nurtured. And as the stars twinkled above, the ranch quiet, except for the soft sounds of the animals, Emma knew that she had found something rare and precious.